am Miss Libber and I'm going to be presenting today's lesson. So, to kickstart today's lesson, I want you to think about the following questions. Have you ever thought about taking a sip of your parents' alcohol at your age? Or taking a drag of a cigarette because somebody has maybe offered it to you? Or experimenting with drugs like weed or cough syrup? If you have said yes to any of these questions, then I want to ask you the following. What if you liked it so much that you wanted to do it again? And what if again becomes every day or maybe even multiple times a day? What would you call this? Yes, substance abuse. So we kick off today's topic with substance abuse. The outcomes for today's lesson is you should be able to define substance abuse, identify the forms of it, and also recognize the symptoms. Now, if I had to ask you to define substance abuse, what would you say? And just to keep you thinking a bit, do you think it's easy to get a hold of these substances used when they abuse substance abuse? So, according to the National Cancer Institute, it is using things such as drugs, alcohol, and pills or chemicals for any reasons other than their intended purposes. Now this brings us to substance abuse and its consequences. Nothing in life comes without consequences. So we are going to watch this YouTube video, and afterwards you are going to tell me how this video made you feel. I will give you a couple of minutes to watch this and then we will continue. Great. So now that we know what substance abuse is, and we know that there are consequences that come with substance abuse, it brings us to the types of substance abuse. Now, the one important thing that I want you to know is that there are multiple ways in which substances can be abused that are both legal and illegal. So, for your first activity, I want you to write down in your book some of the different types of substances that can be abused and see how many you can name. Great. We will come back to these and mark them as we work through our list of substances. If everyone is finished, we are going to be moving on. Now, before we mark our activity, I want you to look at this video. Please pay attention to the message behind the video and what this young boy has gone through when he fell victim to substance abuse. Great. Now that we have gone through what substance abuse is and what it looks like when it affects teenagers, let's discuss the legal and illegal forms of substance. So, these are mentioned in your textbook, so I am briefly going to glance over them. First up in our legal category, we have pills. This ranges from anything from you taking multiple Panados a day or someone else taking multiple Panados a day to anything like pain pills and antibiotics that have been prescribed by doctors. Next up, we have our common household medicines. So these range anywhere from your flu and cough medicines that are usually mixed with any other chemicals to give people that greater high. And this happens because these medicines are usually mixed with alcohol. Thirdly, we are dealing with caffeine. So caffeine is not something that we would always consider as being a substance that can be abused, but a lot of people do because they are addicted to caffeine. I know multiple people who consume 7, 8, 9 cups of caffeine a single day, and that is still a form of substance abuse. Why? Because caffeine is addictive and it can be abused. And people tend to sweep this under the rug just because it's caffeine. It is highly addictive and very few people know or care because it's a lesser of two evils. Much like nicotine. People see nicotine as not as bad as other drugs, because there are worse things that can be used. But nicotine is just as dangerous as any of the illegal and both legal substances that can be abused, because in the end it causes multiple health issues and you can die. Alcohol is up next, and it is probably one of our most abused substances. People tend to turn to alcohol to relax, and at some point it becomes the only thing that they can use to relax. And our last three is probably the three most unexpected substances that people would think are being abused. We have glue, paint, and petrol. Just because these ones are the least expected does not make them any less dangerous. They can kill you, and the scary part of this is all of these legal substances that are abused can be bought over the counter. Now we are going to move on to our illegal substances because we are aware of what the legal ones are. First up, and probably the most common illegal substance that is being abused, is dagga or marijuana. It has over the last few years become quite a big issue underneath the youth. Then we have our pills. We have mandrax and ecstasy. Ecstasy is usually also known as the party drug or the happy drug. Then we have tic, cocaine, and lastly, heroin. Now these substances are highly addictive, so it would be wise to stay as far away from them as possible, as well as anybody who uses them. Because at the end of the day, peer pressure does exist and you can be coerced into using one of these. If you want to do further research on these substances, they are all named and explained in your textbook. Now moving on, we are going to look at the symptoms that come along with abusing substances. For our second activity, I want you to split up in pairs and read the story. Then I want you to see if you can identify any of the symptoms of substance abuse in the story and write them down in your books. I will give you about 10 minutes to do this. Then we are going to swap with another group and we are going to mark them as we work our way through the symptoms of substance abuse. Okay, so now once everybody is finished, we are going to mark these as we make our way through our three categories of the symptoms. So first up, we have physical changes. It usually starts with weight loss, a bad complexion, circle underneath eyes, the red eyes, rashes, being coughing or sick a lot, the jerky movements, them always being tired, having dizzy spells, shaking a lot, red and raw running noses, their changes in their sleeping and eating patterns, and as well as their personal hygiene that declines. Then, the second change would be an emotional change. So, those who abuse these substances will have drastic mood swings. They will tend to isolate themselves much more. They become irresponsible and they don't take responsibility for the things that they have done. They only focus on themselves and they have low self esteem as well as bad judgment. And lastly, we have changes at school and with others. Here is where your home and your school environment, as well as your relationships, are being impacted by substance abuse. So, a few changes and a few effects that alcohol abuse would have would be your marks dropping or your friends' marks dropping, often being absent, discipline at home and school becoming an issue, being abusive and participating in fights, style changing, always in need of money, lying constantly, stealing and losing interest in hobbies and sport and extracurricular activities at school. So, the end of our lesson, there are multiple substances that can be abused, and the majority of them are legal and can be purchased by most adults in any shop. When the abuse starts, there are multiple symptoms that the abuser presents, and this usually can be the sign for the parents or friends to step in and intervene. It is best to avoid these substances at all cost. I'm going to leave you with a small homework assignment that you are going to do, and then we will discuss it the next time that I see you. So I want you to choose one of the above named substances and write a 200-word story where you talk about the chosen drug and the substance abuse symptoms that go along with it. Be creative, and we will read and discuss these the next time I see you. Thank you.